You can tell a lot about a man by the things he refuses to explain. The first time Evelyn Carter noticed Marcus Hale, he was already walking away, shoulders steady, expression unreadable, like whatever had just happened behind him didn't deserve a second glance. It was 7:40 a.m., the kind of cold New York morning that made the glass towers look sharper than usual, sunlight slicing clean across polished floors. Inside the lobby of Carter and Blythe Holdings, everything moved with precision. Heels clicking, phones buzzing, assistants rushing with quiet urgency. And then there was Marcus. Maintenance badge clipped to his chest. Navy work jacket worn at the edges. A man who didn't belong to the noise. Evelyn stood near the security desk, reviewing a report on her phone when she saw it happen. Marcus stepped past a line of waiting employees and swiped his access card twice. Red light. Denied. He didn't argue. Didn't even frown. Just reached into his pocket, pulled out a folded envelope, and handed it to the guard. The guard hesitated, glanced toward Evelyn, then back at Marcus. "You sure about this?" the guard asked quietly. Marcus nodded once. No explanation. No defense. Just that quiet nod, like he had already made the decision long before this moment arrived. Evelyn lowered her phone slightly. Something about the exchange felt off. People didn't give things up like that without a scene, not in her world. Not in a building where everything was negotiated, leveraged, controlled. The guard took the envelope slowly, like it weighed more than paper should. Marcus adjusted the strap of a small, worn backpack slung over one shoulder. It was a child's backpack, faded blue, one zipper slightly broken, a small stitched patch on the side that read Eli. He didn't notice Evelyn watching. Or maybe he did and chose not to care. As he turned toward the exit, a young analyst rushed past him, nearly knocking into his arm. Papers slipped. Coffee sloshed. The analyst muttered something under his breath, already irritated, already late. Marcus bent down immediately, steady hands gathering the scattered pages before they could slide across the marble floor. "You're good," he said, quietly, handing them back. No edge, no irritation, just calm. The analyst didn't even look at him, just grabbed the papers and moved on. Marcus straightened, wiped his hands on a cloth tucked into his pocket, and continued walking. Evelyn watched that part longer than she meant to. Not the denied access, not the envelope, but that moment. The way he stopped, the way he helped. Like losing something important didn't change who he was for even a second. Outside, through the glass doors, the city moved in its usual rhythm. Taxis honking, steam rising from the streets, people chasing time. Marcus stepped into it without hesitation, blending into the current like he had always known how to disappear when necessary. Evelyn glanced at the envelope now resting in the guard's hand. "What was that?" she asked, her voice even controlled. The guard shifted slightly. "His badge, ma'am. And keys to the service access. Said he wouldn't be needing them anymore." Evelyn frowned, just barely. "Did he say why?" The guard shook his head. "No, ma'am. Just said it was time." Time. The word lingered in the air longer than it should have. Evelyn turned her gaze back to the street, but Marcus was already gone. And for reasons she couldn't quite explain, that bothered her more than it should have. By noon, the absence had already settled into the building like a quiet imbalance, something slightly off that no one could name, but everyone adjusted to without thinking, because that was how places like Carter and Blythe worked. They absorbed people, replaced them, moved on without pause. But Evelyn Carter did not move on as easily as she expected. She found herself glancing toward the service corridor twice during a meeting, once while signing a contract, once more when her assistant mentioned a minor delay in maintenance scheduling, nothing critical, nothing urgent, just a note that things were running slower than usual, and for reasons she could not justify. She asked, who was covering early shift this morning? Her assistant hesitated, scrolling through a tablet. It was Marcus Hale, but he is no longer assigned. Evelyn nodded as if that closed the matter, but it did not, because she remembered the envelope, the way he handed it over without negotiation, and people did not leave stability behind like that unless something had already pushed them past the point of hesitation. Later that afternoon, she stepped into the executive elevator, the kind that bypassed most floors, silent, efficient, designed to keep distance between levels of power, but as the doors slid open on the ground floor, she paused instead of stepping out, her eyes drifting toward the security desk again. The same guard stood there, posture unchanged, routine intact, except now the envelope was gone, replaced by a small plastic tray holding access cards waiting to be reassigned. "What happened to his locker?" she asked, her tone neutral, almost casual. The guard looked up, surprised she was still thinking about it. "Cleared out, ma'am. Did not take much, just a jacket and that bag." Evelyn's gaze shifted slightly. "That was not his bag," she said, more to herself than to him. The guard nodded. "No, ma'am. It belonged to his son. He brings it sometimes after school, keeps it behind the desk when he works late." Evelyn did not respond immediately. Something about that detail settled differently than the rest. Not dramatic, not heavy, just a quiet piece of context that made the morning feel less complete, as if she had only seen half of the picture and assumed the rest. Outside the building, a light wind moved through the street, pushing paper cups along the curb, carrying distant sounds of traffic and voices layered over one another. Somewhere in that movement was Marcus, already part of a different rhythm, already adjusting to whatever came next. And inside, on the 50th floor, Evelyn stood by the glass window that stretched from ceiling to floor, the city laid out beneath her in clean lines and constant motion. She had built her life on control, on understanding outcomes before they arrived, on making decisions with full information, and yet this one man had stepped out of her system without leaving behind anything she could measure. No complaint, no request, no explanation, just a quiet exit that felt less like resignation and more like something chosen, something deliberate. And that was what unsettled her, not that he left, but that he did not need to be understood when he did it. That evening, the city felt colder than the forecast suggested, the kind of chill that settled into the spaces between buildings and lingered longer than it should. And somewhere 3 blocks away from Carter and Blythe, Marcus Hale sat at a small kitchen table that had seen better years, its surface worn smooth by time and quiet routines, a single overhead light casting a soft circle around him and the boy across from him. Eli sat with his elbows tucked in, carefully erasing a math problem that refused to come out right, his pencil moving slower each time as if patience could solve what numbers could not. Marcus watched him without interrupting, not correcting, just present, his jacket folded neatly over the back of his chair, the same one he had worn that morning, the same one that now carried no badge, no access, no place to return to. "You are pressing too hard," Marcus said gently after a moment. Not looking directly at the paper, Eli paused, adjusted his grip, tried again. This time the pencil moved lighter, smoother, the answer still not perfect, but closer. Marcus gave a small nod. Not praise, just acknowledgement, the kind that did not make a child feel measured, only seen. The apartment was quiet except for the hum of an old refrigerator and the occasional sound of cars passing outside. No television, no music, just the rhythm of a normal night. Except it was not entirely normal, because on the far corner of the table sat a stack of unopened envelopes, bills. Mostly, some marked urgent in red ink, others softer but no less real. Marcus had not touched them yet, not out of avoidance, but because he understood timing. There were things a man handled after his child slept, not before. Eli glanced up after finishing the problem. "Did you work late today?" he asked, voice casual. Unaware of the shift that had already happened, Marcus leaned back slightly, resting his hands on his knees. "No, not today," he said, steady, no hesitation. Eli nodded as if that made sense. Children accepted what they were given when it was delivered without tension. "That is good," Eli said, returning to his workbook. "You missed dinner yesterday." Marcus nodded once, quiet, then reached for the small backpack resting beside the chair. The same faded blue, the same stitched name. He unzipped it carefully and pulled out a folded permission slip, placing it in front of Eli. "Field trip on Friday," he said. Eli's eyes lit up just a little, not loud excitement, just a quiet spark. "To the Science Museum." Marcus tapped the paper lightly. "You will need $10. Eli hesitated, the kind of pause that came from learning how the world worked earlier than most. "It is okay if I do not go," he said, trying to sound like it did not matter. Marcus shook his head gently. "You are going," he said, simple, certain, no room for negotiation. Eli studied his face for a second, then nodded, trusting the answer even if he did not understand how it would happen. Marcus folded the paper again, placed it back into the backpack, and zipped it slowly. Deliberate, Outside, a siren passed in the distance, fading as quickly as it came. Inside the apartment, nothing moved except the quiet weight of decisions already made. Marcus stood after a moment, walked to the sink, rinsed a single coffee mug that had long since gone cold, and set it upside down to dry. His reflection faint in the small window above the sink. Older than his years, steadier than most. Not broken, not rushing, just carrying something he had chosen without needing anyone to witness it. And in that stillness, it became clear that whatever he had walked away from that morning, he had not lost direction. He had simply changed it. The next morning began earlier than usual, not because anything urgent demanded it, but because Marcus Hale had always believed that time mattered more when there was less of it. The apartment still wrapped in quiet as he moved through it with practiced ease, careful not to wake Eli too soon. The smell of coffee filled the small space. Dark and simple, no sugar, no distractions, just enough to carry him through the hours ahead. He stood by the window for a moment, watching the street below come alive in slow layers, delivery trucks, early commuters, the steady pulse of a city that did not wait for anyone to catch up. Then he turned back, folding a small stack of bills and placing them neatly into a drawer instead of leaving them out, not hiding them, just choosing the right time to face them. A decision like everything else he did, measured, intentional. Eli shuffled into the kitchen a few minutes later, hair uneven, eyes still heavy with sleep. He climbed into his chair without a word. Reaching automatically for the cereal box, Marcus poured the milk, set the bowl in front of him, and sat across the table, not rushing the morning, not filling the silence, just letting it exist. "You will need a jacket today," Marcus said after a moment, glancing toward the window. "It is colder than yesterday." Eli nodded, spoon halfway to his mouth, accepting the information without question. Small routines like that built something stronger than comfort. They built trust. And Marcus protected that more than anything. After breakfast, he walked Eli to the bus stop, hands in his pockets, shoulders relaxed, the same calm presence he carried everywhere. When the bus arrived, Eli turned back once, just long enough to check that his father was still there. Marcus gave a small nod, nothing dramatic, just enough, and Eli stepped onto the bus without hesitation. The doors closed, and Marcus remained standing there for a second longer than necessary, watching until the bus disappeared around the corner. Then he turned and walked in the opposite direction, not toward Carter and Blythe, not toward anything familiar, but toward whatever came next. The streets felt different without a destination tied to them. But Marcus did not slow down. He moved with the same quiet certainty, as if direction came from within rather than from a place. About 20 minutes later, he stopped in front of a small brick building with a faded sign that read Community Learning Center, the kind of place most people passed without noticing. But Marcus stepped inside without hesitation. The hallway smelled faintly of old books and cleaning solution. A woman behind the front desk looked up, surprised but not unfriendly. "Can I help you?" she asked. Marcus nodded once. "I am here about the after-school program," he said, voice steady. The woman flipped through a binder, scanning a list. "We are full right now," she replied, apologetic but firm. Marcus did not react immediately, did not push, just nodded as if he had expected that answer. "Is there a waiting list?" he asked. The woman paused, then handed him a form. "You can put his name down," she said. Marcus took the form, filled it out carefully, every letter clear, every line deliberate. When he finished, he placed it back on the desk with a quiet thank you. No urgency, no pressure, just a step taken. Outside, the wind picked up again, colder now, sharper, but Marcus adjusted his jacket and kept walking, because whatever he had given up the day before was not the end of something. It was the beginning of a different way forward, one that required the same thing he had always carried, patience without complaint, and a willingness to keep moving even when the path was not yet visible. By late afternoon, the sky had turned a dull shade of gray, the kind that flattened the city into something quieter, less defined, and Marcus Hale stood just outside a small grocery store on the corner of 8th Avenue, a brown paper bag in one hand, the other tucked into his jacket pocket, not to keep warm, but to hold steady the few folded bills he had left after making choices that did not leave much room for error. Inside the bag were only the essentials: a loaf of bread, a carton of eggs, a small jar of peanut butter, nothing extra. Nothing wasted. He stepped aside as a woman struggled to push the door open with both hands full, balancing a toddler on her hip and a bag slipping from her grip. Marcus reached out without hesitation, holding the door, steadying the bag before it fell. "You are good," he said quietly, stepping back once she had her balance. She gave a quick thank you, distracted but sincere, and moved on. Marcus did not linger on it, did not expect anything from it. Just adjusted his grip on his own bag and walked down the sidewalk, the wind cutting sharper now, carrying the faint smell of rain that had not yet started. A few blocks later, he stopped at a crosswalk, where a man in a worn jacket stood beside him, looking at a bus schedule posted on a bent metal pole, confusion written across his face. The man turned slightly, noticing Marcus. "You know if the 14 runs this late?" he asked, voice uncertain. Marcus glanced at the sign, then at the street, calculating without needing to check anything twice. "It should be here in about 10 minutes, he said. "Calm." The man nodded, relief softening his shoulders. "Appreciate that." Marcus gave a small nod in return. Nothing more. The light changed, and they crossed in silence, two people sharing a moment that did not need to last longer than it did. When Marcus reached his building, he paused at the base of the stairs, shifting the bag slightly, not from weight, but from habit, the kind that came from carrying responsibility long before anyone noticed. Upstairs, the apartment was still empty. Eli would not be home for another hour. Marcus set the groceries down, unpacked them methodically, placing each item where it belonged, as if order in small things could hold together what felt uncertain in larger ones. He cracked 2 eggs into a bowl, whisked them lightly, then stopped, glancing at the clock, adjusting his plan without frustration. He covered the bowl, placed it in the refrigerator, and wiped his hands slowly on the same cloth he carried everywhere. The silence returned, but it did not feel heavy. It felt like space, like time being used carefully. Marcus moved to the small table, opened the drawer, and pulled out the folded bills again, this time counting them once, not twice, just enough to confirm what he already knew. His expression did not change, no tension, no visible worry, just acceptance. Then he reached for a different envelope, one smaller, one with Eli's school name printed across the top. He slid $10 inside, flattened it gently, and set it aside where it would be seen in the morning. No announcement, no explanation, just a quiet solution placed exactly where it needed to be, outside. The first drops of rain began to fall, tapping softly against the window, steady and unhurried. And Marcus stood there for a moment, watching them gather, not thinking about what he had given up, not thinking about what he did not have, only focusing on what still needed to be done, because for him, that was always enough to keep moving forward. The next day unfolded with the same quiet rhythm, but somewhere beneath it, something had already begun to shift, though no one had named it yet. Not even Evelyn Carter, who stood in her office on the 50th floor, reviewing a routine audit report that should have taken 5 minutes, but had now stretched into 15, her eyes scanning the same section twice, then a third time, not because the numbers were unclear, but because something small refused to settle, a minor discrepancy in maintenance logs, a scheduled access override that had been used outside normal hours, not large enough to trigger concern on its own, but precise enough to suggest intention. Evelyn set the report down slowly, her fingers resting on the edge of the glass desk. She did not react immediately, did not call anyone, just sat with it for a moment, letting the detail exist without forcing it into a conclusion. Then she reached for her phone, not to escalate, but to ask a simple question. "Can you send me the security logs from yesterday morning, early shift?" Her assistant paused on the other end, slightly surprised by the specificity. "Yes, ma'am, right away." A few minutes later, the files arrived, clean, organized, every movement in and out of the building recorded with quiet precision. Evelyn opened the timeline, scrolling back to the moment she had seen Marcus at the security desk. There it was, time-stamped. His arrival, the denied access, the exchange with the guard, nothing unusual at first glance, just a man turning in his credentials. But Evelyn slowed the footage, watching not for what happened, but for what did not. No hesitation, no attempt to argue, no visible frustration, just a decision already made before the moment required it. She leaned back slightly, her gaze narrowing just enough to suggest focus. not suspicion. Then she noticed something else. Earlier in the log, before the main lobby cameras had captured him, there was a brief entry from a side access point, a maintenance override used. At 6:12 a.m., authorized under Marcus Hale's credentials. Evelyn frowned. Just slightly. Not because it was improper, but because it was unnecessary. His shift did not begin until 7. She clicked into the corresponding camera feed. The image grainier, less polished than the main lobby, but clear enough. Marcus entered alone, carrying that same small backpack, moving quickly but not rushed. Purposeful without drawing attention, he disappeared down the service corridor, and for a moment, the screen showed nothing, just an empty hallway. Then he reappeared several minutes later. Same pace, same expression, as if whatever he had gone to do was already complete. Evelyn paused the footage, the frame catching him mid-step, one hand adjusting the strap of the backpack, the other holding something small, rectangular. It was gone in the next frame, placed somewhere out of view. She rewound it once, then again, not to confirm what she saw, but to understand it, because this did not fit the version of him she had assumed. This was not careless, not impulsive. It was precise, controlled, intentional. Evelyn closed the video slowly, her reflection faint in the darkened screen, and for the first time since he walked out of the building, she did not think about why he left. She thought about what he had done before he did, and why he had chosen not to say a single word about it. Outside her office, the building moved as it always did, efficient, structured, predictable, but inside, something small had shifted, not loud enough to disrupt anything, just enough to create a question where there had only been certainty before, and Evelyn Carter was not used to questions she could not answer. The detail stayed with her longer than it should have, not loud, not urgent, just persistent, like a quiet thread that refused to be ignored, and by early evening, Evelyn Carter found herself doing something she rarely allowed, stepping outside the structure of her own routine. She did not call a meeting, did not delegate the question. She simply walked down from the 50th floor to the level most executives never visited. The service corridor where the air felt different, less filtered, more real. The fluorescent lights hummed softly overhead, and the polished silence of the upper floors gave way to something more human, more lived in. She moved without announcing herself, heels quieter on the concrete, her presence almost out of place, and yet intentional. She stopped near the access point she had seen in the footage, the same side entrance Marcus had used at 6:12 that morning. Nothing about it stood out at first glance, just a standard maintenance door, keypad entry, a small storage area beyond it. But Evelyn stepped inside anyway, her eyes adjusting to the dimmer light, scanning not for what was obvious, but for what might have been left behind, something small, something easily missed. And then she saw it. Not hidden, not locked away, just placed on a low metal shelf beside a stack of cleaning supplies. A small rectangular box, plain, unmarked, the kind of thing that did not belong to the building. She approached slowly, not out of hesitation, but out of recognition that whatever this was, it mattered. She reached out, lifted the box. It was lighter than expected. Inside, neatly arranged, were several sealed envelopes, each labeled in careful handwriting. Names she recognized, employees from the early shift, maintenance staff, security, even one addressed to the front desk receptionist. Evelyn opened one at random, not out of intrusion, but because the situation demanded understanding. Inside was a grocery store gift card, modest in amount, but intentional, along with a short note, written in the same steady hand, for the days that run longer than they should. No signature, no explanation, just that line. Evelyn stood there for a moment, the weight of it settling in slowly. This was not part of his job, not required, not expected. She checked another envelope, same pattern, different names, same quiet generosity, given without recognition, without any need to be seen. She closed the box carefully, placing it back exactly where she found it. Her movements slower now, more deliberate, because the man she had watched walk away without explanation was no longer just an employee who made a decision. He was someone who had already been giving more than anyone had noticed, and he had chosen to do it in silence, outside the system, outside the recognition that people in her world often relied on. Evelyn stepped back into the hallway, the hum of the lights louder now, or maybe she was just more aware of it. And for the first time since she had questioned his actions, she understood something simple but difficult to accept. He had not left because he had nothing to hold on to. He had left because he had already given everything he believed mattered, and he had done it without needing anyone, including her, to understand it in the moment, and that realization did not come with guilt. Not yet. It came with something quieter, something heavier, a shift in perspective that could not be undone once seen. The next morning did not announce itself any differently, but Evelyn Carter carried it differently, the kind of quiet awareness that changes how a person sees without altering anything visible on the surface. She arrived at the building earlier than usual, not out of urgency, but intention, the lobby still half awake, the rhythm slower, less crowded. She paused near the security desk again, the same place where she had first seen Marcus walk away, the same polished floor, the same steady hum of a place built to function without interruption. But now she saw it differently, not as a system, but as a space filled with people she had never truly looked at. She turned slightly, her gaze drifting toward the service corridor, then back again, as if measuring a distance that had always been there, but never acknowledged. "Has anyone asked about those envelopes?" she said quietly to the guard, her tone even, not demanding. The guard shook his head. "No, ma'am, most of them probably just thought it was from management." Evelyn nodded once, but did not correct him, because that misunderstanding felt like something Marcus would have allowed, not needing the credit, not needing the story to follow him. She stepped into the elevator, the doors closing softly, lifting her back into the part of the building that moved faster, spoke louder, expected more, but something in her pace remained slower, more deliberate. Later that afternoon, after meetings had come and gone, after decisions had been made with the same precision she had always relied on, Evelyn stepped out again, this time not toward the service corridor, but outside the building itself, the city meeting her with its usual noise, taxis, voices, movement layered on movement. She stood there for a moment, scanning without a clear destination, not searching in the obvious sense, but aware that for the first time in a long while, she did not know exactly where something would lead. A few blocks down, she noticed a familiar shape, not a face, not at first, just a posture, a way of standing still while everything else moved. Marcus Hale stood near a bus stop, one hand resting lightly on the strap of that same faded blue backpack, the other holding a folded piece of paper, his attention focused on the street ahead, not distracted, not waiting with impatience, just present. Evelyn approached slowly, not wanting to interrupt what felt like a space he carried with him, and when she stopped a few feet away, he noticed her, not startled, not surprised, just aware, his expression unchanged, steady as it had been that morning in the lobby. For a moment, neither of them spoke, the noise of the city filling the space between them, and then Evelyn said, simply, "You came in early that day," her voice calm, not accusatory, just stating what she now knew. Marcus nodded once. "Yes, ma'am." He did not elaborate, did not offer more than what was asked. The silence returned, but it was different now, not empty, not uncertain, just shared. Evelyn glanced briefly at the paper in his hand, a permission slip, the edge of it worn from being folded and unfolded. "You handled something before your shift," she said. Again, not a question. Marcus looked at her then, directly, not defensive, not guarded, just honest in the way he held his silence. "I took care of what needed to be done," he replied, his voice low, steady, and that was all. No explanation, no story, just a statement that carried more weight than anything longer would have. Evelyn held his gaze for a second longer than necessary, then nodded, not because she fully understood every detail, but because she understood enough to know that what he had done was not something that needed to be justified. And for the first time, she did not try to fill the silence with questions. She let it remain exactly as it was, because in that quiet space, something had already changed, not in him, but in the way she chose to see him. The bus arrived with a soft hiss of brakes, its doors folding open as people stepped forward in quiet routine. But Marcus Hale did not move right away, not because he was unsure, but because he had already decided what mattered before the moment required action. Evelyn Carter stood beside him, the city continuing around them without pause, and for a brief second, the distance between who they were and what they understood felt smaller than it had ever been. "There is an opening," Evelyn said. Finally, her voice calm, measured, not offering, not commanding, just placing the words between them. Marcus glanced at her, not surprised, just listening. After-school program, she continued. And a position here, if you want it, early shift, same hours, better terms. She did not explain how she made it happen, did not frame it as generosity, just as a correction, something aligned rather than given. Marcus held her gaze for a moment, then looked down at the backpack strap in his hand, adjusting it slightly, a small movement, but deliberate. I appreciate that, he said, his voice steady. But my schedule needs to stay the way it is. There was no defiance in it, no hesitation, just clarity. Evelyn did not respond immediately, not because she did not understand, but because she was not used to hearing no without resistance behind it. It would help, she said, not insisting, just stating what seemed obvious from where she stood. Marcus nodded once, acknowledging the truth in her words without accepting it. It would, he agreed. But it would take me away from what I already promised. Evelyn's eyes shifted slightly, not confused, but recalibrating. Your son, she said quietly. Marcus did not answer with words this time. He did not need to. The silence carried it. The bus driver glanced toward them, waiting, the door still open. A moment asking for a decision. Marcus stepped forward then, not rushed, not delayed, just on time for the life he had already chosen. He placed one foot on the step, then paused, turning back just slightly, not to reconsider, but to acknowledge. Thank you, he said, simple, genuine, not for the offer, but for the understanding that had come with it. Evelyn nodded, a small movement, almost imperceptible, but real. Marcus stepped onto the bus, the doors closing behind him with a soft finality. And as the bus pulled away, blending back into the rhythm of the city, Evelyn remained where she was, not watching until he disappeared, but standing in a space that no longer felt the same as it had before, because for the first time in a long time, she had offered something that did not solve the situation and had been met with a response that did not need solving, and somehow, that felt like a clearer answer than anything she could have arranged. Later that evening, back in her office, the city lights reflecting across the glass, Evelyn stood in silence, her phone resting untouched on the desk, the reports waiting, the meetings scheduled, everything still in place, but something within it had shifted, not in scale, not in structure, just in perspective. She glanced once toward the service floor below, not with authority, not with distance, but with recognition, because she understood now that what Marcus Hale had walked away from was never the most valuable thing he held, and what he chose to protect could not be measured by titles, schedules,